Yo, what's going on, guys? Sindel Prince here, back with another deck tech, and today we're going over the Watcher in the Water. So the Watcher in the Water is a 3 mana plus 2 blue legendary creature Kraken. It's a 9/9, and basically when it enters the battlefield, you tap it with 9 stun counters on it. That's when it enters the battlefield, meaning even if you were to flicker this thing, it still will have 9 stun counters. It's something kind of like a Hydra, where you pay the mana, you get the counters on it, but a Hushwing Gryff will not stop the counters from being put on. And basically, what a stun counter is if the permanent would become untapped, it instead removes the counter and it does not untap instead. So the Watcher in the Water is a second effect, where if you draw a card during the opponent's turn, you create a 1/1 tentacle creature token. And as a third effect, where if a tentacle you control dies, you untap a Kraken and you put a stun counter on a card the opponent controls. So basically the idea of this deck is we're going to be drawing lots of cards in the opponent's turn and eventually buffing up those tentacles. If a couple of them die, maybe we'll wake up our Watcher in the Water. So, with that being said, let's go over some cards. To start, we have just kind of like small bursts of card draw. So we have kind of more staple cards like Brainstorm, like Opt, like Consider, like Thought Scour, and Frantic Search. So these are cards that are found in tons of different decks. They're almost considered staples. And basically, when they are cast, they will draw you some amount of cards on the opponent's turn. Sometimes they'll have an additional effect, like Brainstorm draws you 3 actually, and then it puts 2 back on the top. They'll scry you 1, Consider will surveil you 1, Thought Scour mills someone for 2. Frantic Search will basically be a free way to draw some cards. And these are just nice, cheap, early game spells that you can cast to kind of thin out your curve, thin out your hand, and then if you draw them later in the game, it'll be able to be just like a 1 mana kind of burst to draw some cards. In addition to these kinds of like bursts of card draw, we have cards like Perilous Research, Keep Watch, and Meeting of the Minds. So Meeting of the Minds is a card that I feel like does not see enough play so far, and the card is pretty good in this deck because it's a 4 mana instant. It draws you 2 cards, and normally that's really bad. However, it has the Convoke mechanic, which means you can tap creatures you control to pay for the casting cost. So basically, you get enough Krakens out with your Watcher, and you're able to just cast this for free, drawing you 2 cards. Keep Watch is really good because you'll be playing against an opponent sooner rather than later that'll try to go for some kind of a decent attack, and you'll be able to spend 3 mana and draw a ton of cards off the Keep Watch. If you're not playing against any opponents that will be doing some decent attacking, maybe your opponents are all playing kind of like control decks, or they're playing more like say an Enchantress deck or something, or they're attacking with just like 1 creature, you're not going to get a ton of value off it. You can always cast it during your turn when you're attacking with a ton of Krakens just to draw. Even though you won't get any more, you could still just use it as a nice 3 mana way to draw a bunch of cards. Then we have Perilous Research. This card is 2 mana, you draw 2, which on the surface seems really good. However, you have to sacrifice permanent. Normally, that restriction is sometimes just makes the card really unplayable. However, we're making a ton of expendable 1/1 Krakens. So if a Kraken dies, you just remove stun counters. You're getting a ton of value off this card. Next up, we have a ton of just big bursts of card draw. So these are kind of similar, just mostly just instants that will draw you a sizable amount of cards on the opponent's turn. So we have a ton of X spells, such as Blue Sun Zenith, Transcendent Message, Commander's Insight, Diviner's Portent, Pull from Tomorrow, and Even the Score. And all of these cards, they just say instant. You pay X into them, and you draw X cards, and most of them will have a second effect, like Blue Sun Zenith shuffles into the deck. Pull from Tomorrow is a little cheaper, but it makes you discard a card, kind of stuff like that. We also have this card Flow of Knowledge, which I'm going to count as a bigger burst of card draw because after you play your commander, if you play this card right after following your commander, even if you don't have an extra land, you're still drawing 5 cards for 5 mana, which makes you 5 tentacles, which is an extremely efficient kind of rate. Next up, we have some continuous ways to draw some cards. So we have lots of ways in this deck that we're going to draw some cards in the opponent's turn, but they're more of a permanent source. These are going to be permanents, obviously, of ways to draw cards. So we have cards like Mystic Remora and Nezahal. These cards will draw you cards on the opponent's turn after they cast spells. These ones specifically interact with non-creature spells. If you have a Rhystic Study, I do also recommend running that in this deck. However, depending on your play group, your budget, whatever, maybe not. There's also cards such as the Ever-Watching Threshold that draws you cards when your opponents attack you. Cards like the Mind's Eye, which allows you to just draw whenever your opponents draw by just paying some mana into it. Psychic Possession also allows you to draw when an opponent draws. It's an enchantment, aura, and it targets a player, and whenever that player draws, you draw, and you skip your draw step. But that's okay, because you'll be drawing enough cards. Other cards, such as Arcanus the Omnipotent, is a little more top-endy kind of card. This card basically allows you to just tap it, draw 3 cards. So a lot of people will use that in the main phase to get some value, but you can always use it during the opponent's turn to draw 3 cards. Also cards like Fairy Mastermind. This is like a flash. It's usually a pretty good staple card, sometimes a little bit of a stacks piece. Because when your opponents draw some cards, you also get to draw cards, and also has an activated ability. If you somehow miraculously run out of cards in this deck, you can always pay 4 mana to just draw a card. Wavebreak Hippocamp is another really good card in this deck because you're going to be casting lots of spells in the opponent's turn in order to draw those cards. So this will just give you more cards every time you cast a spell. Then we have a couple artifacts here that are going to draw you cards on the opponent's turn. So we have Idol of the Oblivion. This card on its own doesn't necessarily do anything. However, after you've drawn some cards off, say a big X spell off of a cantrip, your Watch on the Wall will trigger. It will make you a 1/1 token. That 1/1 token is, well, it's a token for the Idol of Oblivion, so therefore allows you to tap it to draw a card. It also has an ability that allows you to make a 10/10, although, depending on the situation, if you need to go tall rather than wide. I'm also putting the One Ring in this deck. I completely understand if you don't want to play this card. Another solution to this is you can just play a cheaper card, such as this card here, Tolarian Winds, which I was playing for a while, but then I recently cut it from the deck. Just kind of similar things, draw you a ton of cards on the opponent's turn. And the One Ring is just a really expensive card right now, and I understand that that's not necessarily in your budget. However, it's very good in this deck because, as you guys know, the One Ring draws you lots of cards in the opponent's turn. It also gives you protection. It's relatively cheap. Most people will just draw the cards in the main phase, which is normally the optimal way to do it. However, with the Watcher in the water, we are able to draw the cards in the opponent's turn so we can make the 10. Next up, I'm going to show you guys a few kinds of payoffs for playing a Draw Tribal deck. So we have Teferi's Aegis Insight and Alhamrit's Archive. These are both permanents that basically say when you draw a card, you draw 2 instead. So basically doubles your card draw, allowing you to draw so many more cards, make so many more tentacles, and these cards are really good for the deck. We also have some cards that'll draw you cards during your turn, but specifically because we're playing a token strategy. So we have Reconnaissance Mission, Bident of Thassa, and Coastal Privacy, which are all the 4-mana classic enchantment that allows you to draw cards when your creatures deal combat damage. This will allow you to draw some even more cards if you want it. Another card we're also playing is Unctus Grand Matact, which has some similar wording to it. It's a 3-mana creature that allows you to draw some cards when a blue permanent becomes tapped. All of your tentacles are blue, so therefore you'll be able to draw a discard. So this is just a looter kind of thing. It's a little worse than the other effects, but it does cost less. It's a body on the board. Has some other utility to it. It's not a bad card. Next up, we have some kinds of anthems to buff up the tokens to close out the game. So cards like the Caged Sun and Gauntlet of Power are kinds of expensive artifacts that will give your board a little anthem. It'll double your mana, so therefore it'll allow you to draw more cards by dumping that mana into X spells. And it makes more tentacles to benefit off the buff. So these cards are both really good in the deck. Other kinds of anthems is this Eldrazi Monument, which I picked up recently. Eldrazi Monument is an awesome anthem. It allows you to give your creatures +1/+1, flying and indestructible. However, you have to pay a maintenance cost at the upkeep of a sacrificed creature. However, you're drawing enough cards that even if you have a small board at the time that you play this, you should have enough to just sacrifice a tentacle and then eventually draw more cards, and not all of your things are 2/2 and evasive. We also have the Heraldic Banner. This is a 3-mana mana rock, which normally 3-mana mana rocks are not the best in Commander. However, this one will give your tentacles +1/+0. So this is kind of like another anthem that also ramps you, which is really good. This is a nice, perfect early game play. We also have some other cards that benefit from you drawing cards, such as Ominous Seas, that allows you to make big 80 Krakens when you draw enough cards. Cards like Psychosis Crawler, that are going to be massive on their own. They're going to draw, and then they're going to drain the table out for a ton of damage. Cards like this Squid Illusion here, that grow when you draw cards. And that's kind of it for these kind of things. We also have cards like Junk Winder that are going to benefit from you having tokens and playing tokens, because they're going to allow your opponents to tap down stuff. And while you're tapping down stuff, if your tentacles die, your commander will be able to put some stun counters on them. So it allows you to kind of tap, then put a stun counter on them, which is also really good. We also have this Invasion of Segovia, which is a newer card. It's that battle mechanic. It basically makes you two Krakens, and then it gives all of your spells Convoke, which is a really important keyword for this whole deck, especially since this card comes down kind of cheap, kind of early. Only 4 battle. This is a perfect card for the deck. And to wrap it up, kind of for like the cards that care about you drawing cards, we have Triskaidekaphile and Wizard Class. These both give you no maximum hand size and kind of a payout to drawing lots of cards. If you have nothing, Triskaidekaphile is winning a couple games because of that ability to win the game at your upkeep if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand. With all these kinds of X draw spells, it's really easy to kind of sculpt your hand to have specific amounts of cards in it, so therefore Triskaidekaphile is a really good include. Wizard Class, it gives you no maximum hand size for just the blue mana. However, it'll also be able to draw you some cards if you run out of some steam, and then that final ability allows you to just make a massive board state with these tentacles. Maybe you just buff up a tentacle so you can go tall and wide. Maybe buff up your commander some more so you can get in for some commander damage. Kind of lots of utility there. Next up, we have some clone effects. So clones work really well with the commander, given that they don't come in as legendary copies. So that's kind of what we're trying to avoid here. So we have cards like Sakashima of 1,000 Faces, Spark Double, Ereticus's Vile Duplication, and Sakashima the Imposter. These are all cloning effects that will kind of get around the legend rule, either by having a different name. Sakashima directly says no more legend rule, or just making the copy kind of not legendary. Having a copy if you're Watcher in the Water is really important, because it's really easy to kind of kill a player by drawing 40 cards, making 40 tentacles, and killing them with 40 life. However, Commander is a 4-player game, so there's 2 other opponents you always have to worry about. So making more tentacles is always really good in order for you to expand your board state, and almost kind of gives you a little protection too, because they'll be trying to gun for your commander as early as they can. So if you can get a clone effect down, then it kind of makes a single target removal spell redundant. To kind of wrap this deck list up, we have some more staple cards. We have cards such as Arcane Denial and Abjure, which are both allowing you to counter a spell. And they kind of have a little more utility in this deck, so compared to something like a counter spell or negate. Although, if you are on a budget and you are looking to build this deck, Counterspell and Negate and like Essence Scatter and cards like those are perfectly fine includes for some of these budget cards. Interaction is a really important part of this game, and honestly, I don't play a lot of it in many of my decks because it's not something that I highly value. However, counterspells are really good with drawing lots of cards. So this one's gonna be able to let you counter a spell, giving you sacrifice a blue permanent, such as a 1/1 Tentacle, And Arcane Denial will draw you cards on the opponent's turn, basically. So, really good effects, definitely needed. We have other kinds of removal, such as this Rapid Hybridization and Filter Out. These cards will just get rid of problems on the board. This will get rid of a creature. This can bounce all of the non-creatures and stuff like that. We have a little protection in the card Propaganda because early on in the game, before we've got an established board state, it can be a little hard to survive because if someone's playing a super aggressive deck, this card's really good. This card's just a really good card in general. Really screws up a lot of players' turns. As you can see, like these gameplay videos, they'll go to attack, and so it's just like Propaganda, and you're like, oh gosh, it's just not good. We also have a couple of equipment here. We have the Swiftfoot Boots. This will give protection to your commander, basically, because the Watcher in the water, if your opponents kind of know what's up, then they'll know to kill the Watcher as soon as they can. So if you're able to get a Swiftfoot Boots onto it, then that's good. This could be substituted for a Lightning Greaves if you have a higher budget, or if you have a copy of it. We also are playing Skull Clamp here. Skull Clamp is really good in this deck. It's the only way to sacrifice your tentacles, because I think the deck lists that are really trying to play like a blue aristocrats kind of thing is just not really the way to go. However, Skull Clamp at a 1 mana draw 2 rate for your tentacles is just such a powerful ability. It'll allow you to wake your Watcher up real quick. It'll allow you to put stun counters on a ton of opponent stuff, which is just a really absurd effect. This card goes crazy. And to kind of really officially wrap it up, we have some very needed mana ramp. Ramp is a really important part of this game, and having enough of it is really important because your commander, although it's not super expensive, it's nice to get them out early. You kind of want them out by like turn 3, 4, kind of the latest, if you can help it. So getting them out early is good, so needing some ramp is good. Also playing all these extra spells, they're really only good if you have mana to dump into them. So, of course, we got staples such as Arcane Signet, we've got a Soul Ring, we've got Commander Sphere, Thought Vessel, Wayfarer's Bauble, Solemn Simulacrum, Sky Diamond, Mind Stone, Silvermere, and Decanter. These cards are all fantastic. It includes to kind of ramp you, because we've already kind of gone over some incidental ramp, such as the Banner, or the Gauntlet of Power, or the Cage Sun, which kind of double your mana. But they have other utilities. These are just straight ramp pieces. Some, I guess, also has some extra utility by allowing you to draw a card on the opponent's turn. If it dies, Decanter gives you that extra no maximum hand size redundancy. And finally, we have the lands. The lands, I am playing 37 islands. And if we can find it here, a single Mystic Sanctuary. I don't think you can run some utility lands if you'd like. However, I think, because you're playing Gauntlet of Power, which cares specifically about basic lands, being able to just get the double mana really consistently is good. Utility lands aren't always good. You're rarely ever using them anyways. Mystic Sanctuary is the only quote-unquote utility land I'm playing, because it will get you an instant or sorcery back from your grave, which is sometimes really good. But really, you just kind of want basics. And yes, I am playing 38, which I know to some of you kind of older Commander players, 38 might seem like a lot. However, I think 38 is that nice sweet spot where it's like you're not flooding out too much with 40 plus, and you're not getting land screwed sometimes at like 36 below. Because I've run deck lists with only 34 lands, and those deck lists just sometimes will just not find the mana it needs. It won't be able to play the game sometimes, especially since this is it's a greater mana deck. You want as much mana as you can. You want to be able to hit your land drops. And it's not always a problem having a ton of lands, because you are drawing so many cards, you should find spells anyway. But that should conclude our deck list on the Watcher in the Water. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.